All right. So the intent of today's drought update is to kind of continue the discussion that we kicked off last month, which was addressing the projected shortage that we see for late next summer. And so I'm going to give a little history on, or I guess some information on where we are with our supplies. And I also have on hand someone here from the Parks Department to talk about tree watering, because that's going to be an important aspect of our outreach if we're going to be asking the community to stop watering their lawns. And then also a big component of that is the public outreach element, and then the financial impacts related to this. I've shown this graphic several times. Basically, not much has changed, and Santa Barbara County is truly the heart of the current drought crisis in California. Looking ahead at NOAA's predictions, they're showing we're right on the edge of predicting below average rainfall, but in essence, what I'm understanding is basically equal chances. They have no idea. They have no idea whether we're going to get rainfall out of this year, significant rainfall out of this year or not. And so for this reason, and based on their projections even last year, we're going ahead and just moving forward with plans as though it is going to continue to stay dry.
If I could just briefly comment, there's a very interesting article in the recent Scientific American by an official regarding the predictions of El Nino last year, and her conclusion was about what you said. They don't know. Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah. I think they'd like to know, and they have their models are cranking away, but I think the changes that are occurring in the climate are making it very difficult for any of the models that they've had to really be able to predict accurately. It very well could be the wettest year on record. We have no idea. So anyway, I think for prudent planning, we're going just assuming it's going to stay just as dry as it's been. And I think that's what's leading us to our conclusions today, where we'll be talking about increasing our conservation target. So September was a good conservation month for our community. Racked up 41% conservation in September, which is fantastic. Again, this is, if there's a silver lining to this drought, it has been the community's response. And it's fantastic. As I like to, when I talk about it, this community went into the drought a very lean water-using community. And so to be able to cut 41% is pretty significant. And in fact, we are right now down to the level of where we were back in the 90s when we had stopped all development and really crimped down on all outdoor watering. And we're at that threshold now, even with the modest increases in population and a booming tourist economy. So I think there's a lot to be said about the changes this community has gone through, and it pains me that we have to ask for more, but this drought continues to just break all records. This is something I want us to stay focused on. Our 12-month running average, what we're going to see, I'm going to start talking more in those terms on a monthly basis, is 35% conservation. We do see typically in the winter months, there's less outdoor water use, less discretionary water use. It's really difficult to hit that 35%. And so we're seeing something less than 30. And then what we're seeing in the summer tends to be 38, 40% conservation. With the discussion today, what we're talking about is moving that 12-month running average to 40%. That's our goal. And so what that's going to look like is in the winter months, hitting 30, 35% would be what we'd expect. But what that means is in the summer, we're hitting probably close to 50% conservation. And so I'd appreciate any feedback on how we message that. But in the end, for simplicity, we're looking for our 12-month running average to be 40%. So our supplies are going to go down through, starting with Lake Cachuma, which is currently at 7.3% of capacity. The city's carryover water, this is water that we've been able to hold and carry forward because of the conservation of our community. This has really been water we've been able to save, but that remaining water will be gone by December. And I think that's kind of a pretty major milestone. We've never not had any entitlement or carryover in Cachuma. So we are, again, another milestone that, not a favorable milestone, but nonetheless a very significant one. A reminder that Lake Cachuma is critical to storage and conveyance, in particular of our imported water. Later on in my manager's report, we'll talk about how we are building up that supply right now. We are importing water every day into Cachuma and building those banks up. Our goal is to build up sufficient bank by early next summer to allow us to meet all of those peaking demands in the community that come up in the summer. We're still waiting on confirmation of the new evaporation formula. I raised this issue because I am getting concerned. Right now it's sitting on the desk of the County Water Agency. We've been asking for confirmation that the new rules, which would be that the evaporation on the lake would be spread equally amongst the remaining water in the lake, has still not been confirmed. And it would be a significant game changer if that were to fall through, because right now the way that the formula is set up with carryover water, which would be gone, all the evaporation for the entire lake, that evaporation from the minimum pool, evaporation from the downstream users' accounts, would all come out of our imported water deliveries. And in essence, would basically decimate those deliveries to the lake. And so we need to get confirmation that that evap formula is going to go into effect. What's on the table is for it to take effect January 1st. And I'm hoping this week or next the County Water Agency will forward that request onto the Bureau.
So what is the how much, this has been confusing to me, how much evaporation is actually happening on what's the physical evaporation, not our calculations and apportionments, but just how much water is evaporating, let's say in the month of October, out of Cachuma at this point? And then how much is our inflow of importation?
That's an absolutely great question. I don't have that offhand. I certainly can get that to you. Do you? Yeah. So what Ms. Dyer was saying is we've lost about 150 to 200 acre feet a month from our supplies in Cachuma for September. So, and we're able to deliver, about 280 acre feet a month is what we're able to deliver. So half of it is gone in September, and that those evaps go up significantly more in the summer. And so, yes, it would erode most of those deliveries to the lake.
I thought we didn't lose our evap on state water.
That is correct. If we pass the water through and use it within 30 days, there is no evap on it. But what we're talking in order to meet next summer's demands is we need to actually stockpile water in the lake. So, yes, you are correct.
Just to throw in a slight technical wrinkle, evaporation is measured by pan evaporimeters. And that's where you get the number that's cited as actual evaporation. It's just about impossible to really measure evaporation in a body of water like the lake itself. So what they're doing is interpreting pan evaporimeter data to the size of the lake.
Commissioner Keller, thank you for adding that, because it is challenging, and in particular, they may have calibrated it when the lake is full, but as you get down to these low levels, it's difficult at best to actually understand how it's going to affect, particularly given, you have sundowners, you have these windy days, that certainly accelerates evaporation as well.
And I would say you have a smaller surface too.
which should help, in theory.
Yeah. Is that taken into account, or is that?
It does. It
Okay.
does. It is based on the surface of the remaining lake.
Okay.
Yes. So if there's a silver lining to a very small lake is the surface area is less. The challenge with that, though, the counterpoint to that is when you have a smaller lake, it warms up faster, and it accelerates evap as well. So we have kicked off work to develop a project to extend the state water pipeline from the dam to where the barge is currently. It's about a 2-mile, 10,000 linear foot extension that would need to be done. I appreciate the leadership we've had at CCWA. Councilmember White was there to push forward with that. We are a ways off. We don't anticipate needing it until the spring of 2018. But we have no room for failure, and so being able to kick off and have that discussion, make sure we get all of our permits in place, and most importantly, get the county on board. The county has been rather resistant to putting this in for various reasons. They have an emphasis on wanting to make sure that there's still recreation that occurs in the lake, and so if we have to pass water through the lake, it helps out with their recreational goals. So I think starting this discussion early is a fantastic idea.
Any question on that? Are we getting the other water agencies involved in this? Or?
Absolutely. It is being paid for through CCWA, which we have all of us participating in, including La Cumbre and some of these smaller water agencies that are involved. So the cost will be shared, yes.
And this will be a permanent pipeline installation or temporary, or is that still undetermined?
Undetermined at this point. I think it would be nice to probably put something in permanent. The problem is it really changes the permitting process. Temporary can probably be permitted fairly quickly. And so those are all things that are being discussed as part of this design. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's just an updated graphic showing the lake elevation or lake storage. We are at the black line here, and for those who aren't familiar with this, the green line was the lake elevation during the last drought, and in which we received in year 5. We've received the miracle month of March, and we missed that one this time around. I have a video for you that we just recently completed. Is it this? So what we're seeing here, this is the State Water Project dumping into Cachuma. This has been noted as the highest waterfall in Santa Barbara County right now. But this little pipeline right here is our lifeline to being able to move imported water into the lake. And you can see just how far down the water level is. You can see these islands. This is just right in front of the dam, these islands that are starting to show up. Certainly, we saw here, this is an old dairy that used to be here and was removed before the lake was filled. Notably, all the bathtub rings. The lake is approximately 100 feet down from its capacity. This is pretty dramatic. So this is the boat launch, the main boat launch. And what you'll notice here is just the time it takes to get to the water. It just keeps going and going. And then you can see this little goat path right here that kind of gets down to one of the docks that's remaining. But you can kind of make out the basic river bottom that used to be here. But just, this is the barge. It's currently our lifeline to keep state water and our remaining carryover water moving to the south coast. This little passage here is here so boats can actually go around the barge. There is a backup generator. This facility just can't go down at this point. This right here, this little pocket of water, is where the barge was just in June. Just seems like just a few months ago. We had dug out a hole so that it could be there for a little bit longer time, but we moved it just in time before the downstream release began. And as you can see, our pipeline now just rests here. We get up here a little further, you'll see these piles. This pipeline used to be tethered right at the very top of this pipe of these piles. Some of these are really tall. And then here is the north portal intake to the Tecolote Tunnel. It's a little over 100 feet tall, and just kind of gives you a sense that, the system was designed around gravity. We used to be able to gravity feed from here to the city or for the south coast, which is very energy efficient. Unfortunately, in times like this, we do have to pump water from the lake. But, 99% of the time, we're able to gravity feed. But certainly gives you an idea of just how low the reservoir is. This area has been deemed Cachuma Meadows at this point. You can't really even see the lake from 154, so we felt like we really needed to bring some of this footage back to our meetings so that people could just see how bad it really is. So just a quick little update on the State Water Rights Order. Just a reminder, it did come out on September 9th. The State Water Rights hearings were held back in 2003. And so it's finally the state getting around to actually issuing their order. Unfortunately, their order was kind of a hybrid of some of the options that were put out there. It wasn't necessarily what we had hoped for. And so we are feverishly looking to model and understand what the state's decision means for our water supplies. It certainly is not a good thing. And we are also studying and bringing back some information to understand the impacts that the invasive species have on steelhead, because we do believe that's playing a significant role in keeping our current program from being successful. CCRB is made up of Montecito Water District, Goleta Water District, and the city, and is committed to protecting our primary water supply throughout the region for coastal agriculture and, of course, for the environmental priorities it represents. We were granted a 45-day extension from the state, so our comments now are due on December 9th. I'm not sure at this time whether we'll have an opportunity to bring this back to Water Commission or Council prior to these comments being due, but I know if we have an opportunity, we will. I think we're going to be working right up to that December 9th deadline to get all of our information in. So a little recap on our imported water. We were very successful this year. We were able to secure a little over 7,000 acre-feet of water. This water is basically available in storage in San Luis Reservoir, and we are having it delivered as we speak, but there are limitations to that. We are planning for next year, given the reservoir elevations right now, that we will see at least a 35% allocation. We think that's a prudent target, at least at this time, and which means that we will be looking for very minimal supplemental water for this coming year. If I had to guess right now, I think it was somewhere in the 1,000 acre-foot range, maybe even less, because we do have so much water in storage already that will get us into 2019. CCWA is the one who oversees all of our imported water deliveries, and they have been working to maximize those deliveries. We really appreciate their efforts to do that. They've been looking at various different options, configurations, so that we can maximize our deliveries to the lake. We hope that we'll be able to deliver more than 3,300, but all of our planning is around our maximum capacity in the pipeline, which is that. So we anticipate all other agencies, given the current drought situation, to be maximizing their deliveries. Based on that delivery to the lake, we have sufficient water to keep that pipeline full through 2019, or into 2019, I should say. Gibraltar storage is at 10%, and as we've talked about the water quality challenges with that remaining water, we are anticipating, we're getting more and more information back about the repercussions of the Ray fire. We are anticipating higher runoffs as a result of the burned watershed. It's kind of a good and bad because of the scorched watershed. Their vegetation isn't there. Typically, it has been taking somewhere around 12 inches of rain before we actually see any meaningful runoff into Gibraltar. The upside to this would be hopefully something less than 12 inches will start yielding some runoff. The challenges with that, it will be laden with silt, which will be a water quality challenge that we're going to be struggling with if we're going to be using that water. The Bear report is estimating that we could see about 500 acre-feet of debris coming into Gibraltar, further diminishing our current capacity, which is just under 6,000 acre-feet. Groundwater wells. We currently have all eight groundwater wells in production. We've been looking at our USGS groundwater model, and currently we're projecting that the basin is at 30% capacity in storage unit 1, and we have somewhere around 3,000 acre-feet of remaining water, usable water in that basin. We're currently extracting about 2,000 acre-feet a year, so it's going quickly. We expect that to slow down, and we are planning on that in our long-range planning. Based on the model, we have extracted sufficient water from the basin that we should expect seawater intrusion, and so we have increased our monitoring to monthly. And we've added some additional locations to make sure we've got a good grasp of where the front is on that seawater intrusion.
Sure. Does the city actually do the monitoring of the water quality in those wells, looking for seawater intrusion?
We have been paying USGS to do it, but we are contemplating us taking the samples to save some money.
Thank you.
In the Foothill Basin, it is currently at 35% of capacity, 35% remaining capacity, with a remaining yield of about 2,000 acre-feet, and we're currently extracting about 1,000 acre-feet a year from that basin. So both basins are basically approaching their historic lows. We believe our supply planning has taken into consideration what's remaining, but we do note as we get out into 2019 that these supplies the groundwater supply is going to be significantly diminished. Desal project offshore, we got some action coming up here. The barge will be leaving Long Beach on October 25th. It'll be loaded with the pumps and the screens and all the piping to complete the intake work. It's intended to arrive in Santa Barbara on the 28th. This barge is going to have a significant crane to be able to set some of these pieces in place, in particular the screen structures, are these massive concrete structures that are going to bolt on to the existing pads that are out there. And this work should be complete by mid-December. And this is going to be one that we'll be following very closely, and we'll be able to give a status update to the Water Commission in November when we come back. But what we've been talking with the contractor about doing is increasing their staffing. So they're going to be working 2 dive shifts a day out there. So basically 16 hours a day, having divers down there to be able to expedite that work, because getting that seawater onshore kicks off the next phase, which is maturing the media. Filter media requires biological growth on it in order to maximize its ability to filter the water. And so based on that current timing, and we're still working with the contractor on this, is that the late January 2017 is probably going to be delayed. We don't yet have a good feel, probably a few weeks at this point, but we hope to have something from them that we feel more confident about here shortly. But the ocean work is one of those big unknowns. We certainly could get storms that come in, and that would basically could stop work, and potentially loss of visibility, which would halter and slow down work as well. And so some of those are some of the vulnerabilities that we're facing related to the offshore work. And then once we start that maturing of the filter media, we believe it's a 42-day process, but it is a biological activity that we're trying to grow, and there is some plus or minuses to that, and so that's kind of driving it. We are meeting weekly right now with the Department of Drinking Water, so that we're all on the same page when it comes to the startup of this facility. They've providing them opportunities to go through the facility for us to test it ahead of schedule, and so when we do the startup, hopefully it goes as seamlessly as possible. I did want to recap. There's been a lot of discussion in the public about, hey, what about renewable energy for Desal? We are still working on that. Certainly, it's kind of taken a back burner to some of our urgent emergency stuff, but this still is important. And so we will be lining up our energy manager to actually come speak to Water Commission and Council and provide an update on where we are. He is still following community choice aggregation as probably the single most significant solution to addressing the electrical demands of the facility. But he is also looking to expand the cogen production and by increasing methane from our digesters, and there's a few different concepts there. Discussion about energy offset credits potentially. Solar PV sites, El Estero and the Desal plant aren't ideal locations for really putting solar, but we do have some great reservoirs that would be. And so bringing back more information about that. And then also battery storage, being able to bank some of that energy and use it during that peak 5 to 8 p.m. at night, which is really what drives a lot of our peak water rates. It's based on your peaking needs, and so if we can shave off that 5 to 8 p.m. usage, it could make a big difference in our ongoing power costs.
Yeah. Are we talking about generating electricity to directly use at city facilities, or putting electricity into the grid, Edison's grid, and getting credit for it?
It's mainly to use it at city facilities. And that's the challenge right now, and nobody knows better than Commissioner Davis over there. But, putting in solar PV at our reservoirs, we don't really have any significant electrical demand at some of our reservoirs, and so we would need to wheel it through SCE's system to get it to the Desal plant or to El Estero or to Gator. And so still trying to push the PUC to make that more of a reality. Commissioner Davis, have anything to add to that?
No, it may take legislation actually to get that done. Each year there is a bill moving through that will allow essentially that to happen, to have the generation offsite and the credits for it. And it's gotten very close each year, so maybe this will be the year.
Yes. So current water supply strategy, I'm going to go start with our monthly supply mix. And this is based on the current target of 35% conservation. And here's where we are noting the shortage now. So this is our mix of supplies in each month going out. We're currently in October. You'll notice we're finishing up the remaining carryover water in the lake. I don't know if I mentioned, but part of finishing up that carryover is moving to this new evaporation formula. It's a criteria. The county said you need to use all of your carryover water before we'll contemplate moving to this evap formula. We'll jump through the hoop. So we are looking to get that water out of there so that we can move to that new formula in January. But as we move through the months of 2017, what we are focused on right now is this August, September, October timeframe, where under the 35% conservation, we have a recognized shortage. It adds up to be about 300 acre feet. Here's what our supplies in Cachuma currently are projected to look like, and here's kind of the scary part in the January, February timeframe, where our supplies in Cachuma are expected to be near zero. And so what you're seeing happening in this time frame is not rainfall. It's not what we're predicting here. This is the buildup of storage from imported water. We need this to actually be up here in the 700 acre foot range so that we can meet these peaking demands we're expecting for next summer. Keeping in mind, there really isn't a lot of contingency with this. So our water supply strategy, we're currently in year 6 as of October 1st. And we do believe we have enough water on hand. It's a matter of when that water is available, going back to that conveyance capacity limitation. And so if we move this community to a 40% conservation target, we believe we will have adequate water to meet all needs going through next summer and allow us to build up a contingency of about 500 acre feet. Should we have any interruptions in our imported water deliveries, should we have an excessive number of wells go down or desal get delayed significantly. So what we are recommending or proposing to get there is to move the community towards a ban of watering turf. The goal is to protect the community's investment in trees and shrubs. We really want to help the community prioritize what we believe the water should be used for. We do believe there's adequate water to water our trees. But at this time, we do not believe we should be spending water on turf or lawns. We believe by targeting turf grass, we can minimize the economic impacts to the community, and we believe it can quickly generate the savings that we're looking for. Staff has gone through and estimated the savings to be somewhere between 500 and 1,200 acre feet. It is a difficult number to estimate because a lot of people have already let their turf grass go. And then there's always the other side of the how many people will comply with this regulation. We will not be going through people's backyards. We will not be using drones to look for violations. This will be, we are recommending, will be based on a complaint-driven enforcement, which is what we do now. When we get complaints, we go out and investigate, and 99% of the time, I'd say 100% of the time right now, that communication, that education resolves the matter. We have not had anybody receive a violation in the form of a $250 fine. One of the other things that we're also recommending as part of this change is also a requirement that all construction activity use recycled water. Now that our facility is up and running, and given our potable water supply conditions, that any need for dust control or soil compaction should be using our recycled water. We did confirm, aside from a very small area up above Sheffield, that every site within the city is within a mile of a fill station on the recycled water system. So we believe that's a reasonable distance to travel to get recycled water. The general ban on turf grass right now will have some exceptions to it. Playing fields at schools and child care centers that are used for active recreation would be exempt. Recreation areas at publicly owned parks and open spaces, again, we do want to encourage people to continue to use our parks, and we do want to create a safe environment for doing so. Golf course putting greens and trees would be tees would be exempt. Watering of certified water-wise grasses. As you may recall, we have been encouraging and even financially supporting the use of some of these native grasses that are out there, such as buffalo grass, which literally need to be watered once a month. we want to continue to provide support to that, and so those types of turf grass would be exempted. And then turf areas directly related to business activities, such as ceremonial areas, would also be eligible for an exemption. They would need to file for a request, and we would be looking for on-site conservation to meet that 40% target. So if they're going to water that lawn, how are they going to meet the 40% conservation overall for the property? There may be areas where they have a wedding venue and it's an important part of their business, and to that extent we can work with them to try and say, okay, what area is really critical to having turf, and how can you make that continue to make the 40% goal. So that's currently what we have out there. In your packet, I've included a copy of the draft resolution. We welcome any feedback the council or the Water Commission has on this. This item is not going to council until November 1st, so we do have time for feedback. I know you just got it in your packet today, so I do apologize, and we welcome that feedback, though, over the next week. If you want to go ahead and email on that.
I'll just say I'm definitely in favor of the proposed draft resolution here. I mean, it makes sense to me, and something that we need to do to make sure we meet our goals next summer. I did want to just note that Commissioner Burney, she's not here today, but she did want me to reinforce that she is definitely in favor of this proposal, and she wanted to make sure that we note that those people that are given the exceptions, that they still are required to meet the 40% goal. I know you just mentioned that, but she just wanted to make sure that that was reinforced. So I will do that for her.
Mr. Chair, I'd actually like to make a motion, because we had a lot of discussion of this at the last meeting, and I don't know that it actually got passed on to council directly. I'd like to make a motion to support the recommendation on the turf ban with all of the conditions that we've discussed today and we discussed at our last meeting. I'd like that to be on the record, though, as a support from the Water Commission, if I could get a second to that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I understand why that would be different from the recommendation for the entire 7B. However, I'm willing to second the motion, assuming that as far as protocol, that's appropriate. So, seconded.
Mr. Chair, given the importance of this item, I would also, again, extend a welcome to any commissioner who'd like to come speak on November 1st. I think it would help out with the discussion. I think there was a lot of confusion about our last meeting with council. We were really just introducing where we needed to go and looking for a discussion and some direction from them, and we did. It was a very helpful discussion. I just to kind of summarize where it was, I think everyone was on board with the urgency of the current water supply situation. I think the discussion was more around, hey, we've asked our community to conserve, and they've risen to that occasion. Can't we just ask them again without telling them how to use their water? And I completely agree. I wish we didn't have to take this step, but I think so much is at risk that we just don't have the time to spend the next 6 months asking the community and waiting. What I hear often from is the people who are down already to like 3 HCF. They're really low users saying, what, I don't know what I can do. What do you want me to do? And so I think by going after turf, it really helps hone the message. If you're using 3 HCF, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. We're really going after that next increment to help. Because in particular, for those people who may be using 3 HCF, we may want them to water their trees. And that's kind of the message that I'm hoping comes out of today's discussion, that we think there still is water for the essential outdoor landscaping right now.
I expect there's an effort being made to identify and communicate with the top water users. Can you describe that a little bit and what opportunities there may be to gain more conservation on that end?
Chair, council member, we about 2 years ago, we actually sent out a letter to all the top 100 users asking for them to reduce their water usage, and we had great feedback from them on that. And most recently, we took a look at our Tier 3 usage. We were curious how much water was still being used in Tier 3. And it ended up being, on average, that is, 40 acre-feet a month is what's being used in Tier 3, which is pretty low. I mean, I think it totaled up to somewhere around 300 acre-feet for the year. A little over 300 acre-feet for the year was Tier 3. And Tier 3 is anything over 16 HCF. And again, that doesn't take into, that could be going to a property that's 2 acres. So that may not be an exorbitant amount of water for a 2-acre parcel with trees. But I think the point that it helped with me is to realize that even if you were to cut out our entire Tier 3 usage and say that that's completely excessive, it would get us about 300 acre-feet of savings for the year. So there isn't a lot of fat left in the current water usage. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 out there, but my point being that we don't have a significant amount of egregious water users right now. The schedule, our recommendation for adoption of the turfgrass watering will be focused on December 6th. So we'll be bringing this back, touching base with council on November 1st, and then coming back. We would like to get this implemented by January 1st, so we'll have a grace period, allow us to kind of staff up internally and start getting the information out there. We believe getting started on this early has multiple merits. One of them, winter rainfall, will kind of smooth that tradition. There really shouldn't be any watering of turf grass in the winter anyway, even based on the last few years of rainfall. If we get that, that's enough to keep your grass alive without any watering. So it's an easy ask, we feel, right there. Allows us the opportunity for public outreach and education, because I think that's been a hallmark of our outreach and why we've been so successful. But ultimately, so that we as a community are fully engaged come the start of this spring's irrigation season. It puts the city in the best interest going into best position going into year 6, and if we do get significant rainfall and it drastically improves our water supply situation, we have the ability to pull back if we need to be.
Mr. Chair, to Mr. Keller, who thank you for seconding. I think it's different in that the recommendations in 7B right now are simply to receive the update and work on the CAST report. This was really aimed at the December 1st meeting at Council, that there would be an item from the Water Commission in that agenda report showing the Water Commission's position relative to this particular support for this item. So I appreciated that second. That's why I made the motion. So if I could have a vote on the motion.
Thanks. So that means we have a motion before the Commission right now.
Correct.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do we want to add that to?
I will try to make the meeting on the 1st.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try and be there too, for sure.
So to summarize, we did have some changes on the enforcement based on feedback we received from council, and that is that we would remain a complaint-driven, given the successful relationship that we have with the community. I feel confident that without patrolling, we will see considerable response to this. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to be peeking in people's backyards. We're not flying drones. We're not doing any of that stuff. But if a neighbor calls in, hey, I was walking my dog at 5 in the morning and I saw the sprinklers on at so-and-so, we will follow up and, in particular, educate. I've put on here our process. We currently, the first complaint is a courtesy notice. We find that this captures about 95% of people anyway. They're more than happy to comply. The second is a violation, and we do follow up with a door hanger and warning letter. And it's not until we get to the second violation that we actually get the $250 fine. And then it ratchets up from there, leading to ultimately a water shutoff if there isn't any compliance. Public outreach. At this time, I wanted to bring up Mr. Downey. He's going to come up and talk a little bit about what the Parks Department is doing to protect our tree infrastructure.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, my name is Tim Downey. I'm the City Arborist for the City of Santa Barbara. The Parks and Recreation Department actively has worked on a strategic drought action plan when the drought declaration was implemented. And since that time, it is a dynamic plan that we evaluate what our water supply is and make changes as needed based on those deliveries. Part of that plan and an attachment to that plan is a historic and specimen tree drought action plan. It outlines how we're going to treat those trees that have been given that special designation. We'll go into a little more detail a little later. And the plan also, the strategic drought action plan also talks about where we're going to use water, where we're going to cut water, where we're going to do things for safety. So the park and turf irrigation priorities, we have prioritized our turf irrigation because we recognize that there are portions of the turf that we manage that we can let go because water's too important to spend on those sites. But we do prioritize water where there is a sports field or a field being used for sports, and that's because without water the field becomes unserviceable and unsafe to use. And the other area where we continue to water at higher levels than other areas is where we have events such as weddings and city events that occur within our parks and facilities. The problem becomes, okay, we've got all these trees in the middle of the park, and they're important for us to save. My example is, the trees took 50, 60, 70, 80 years to get where they are. The turf has grown all along, but if you stop watering the turf, and I'm going to be very positive here, when we get water, you can throw more seed down and throw water on it, and you get a lawn back in a couple of weeks' time. If you lose the trees, you cannot get that investment back for 60, 70, 80 years. So that's why we feel it's very important, not only for the city, but residents to water their trees. It's a long-term investment that can't be recuperated in a short period of time. So in those parks where there is lawn, we are watering the trees that are in the lawn. We're doing that. In some of the planters, there is irrigation that we can turn on for those that don't hit the turf areas. In some of those, there are not. In those situations, we provide water via hoses, soaker hoses at times. We have a water truck and 2 water trailers that we utilize to supplement that water. So our street trees is where we have really prioritized a lot of our effort watering trees. There's a lot of constraints to providing water, and in my last slide, we'll go into where the appropriate locations are to water trees as a resource to the citizens. But the tree roots for these trees are under the sidewalk. They're under the street. They're under people's private walkways. The problem is, how do we get water to those trees? So it's a really big challenge. So the city is prioritizing. Prior to the drought, we water trees that had been planted until they get established. We had a full-time staff member that's his primary responsibility. Since the drought, we looked at, okay, how are we going to prioritize watering with our resources, and what are we going to do first, and how are we going to expand upon that? So We continue to water those young establishing trees, and the drought is actually having an impact on the length of time it takes for those trees to establish because there's less water beyond what we're able to provide. We are prioritizing historic and specimen trees that are rare in our Orpit Park and Fred Chesapeake Park. There are numerous trees that are the only tree of its species in our inventory. So they're very rare and treasured trees that we're doing our best to try and save. Or trees that are susceptible to the drought. A lot of our trees that are planted here are from different regions of the world that receive much more water than we get here. We're fortunate to be able to grow those trees, but when we're in a drought situation, it impacts them even more. So some of those trees are being targeted for getting extra water. And the other issue is some trees, when they become stressed, are subject to attack by insects or diseases, and we've identified those as being priority trees to receive water as well. As I mentioned before, we deliver water to our street trees primarily through water truck and trailers. Our historic Dormus stone pines on East Anapamu, we have found a method that has been developed by others to use a traffic barricade, to fill that with water and attach a soaker hose to that to provide slow, deep watering for the stone pines where there's space to do that. Unfortunately, there isn't enough space to do it as well as we'd like, but we're doing the best that we can. In addition to that, we've reached out to the community. For our smaller trees, we've increased our ability to water by placing watering bags on the young trees. And again, in the last slide, I'll discuss why it's important to water in different places for trees. But the watering bags allow us to fill up 20 gallons of water, and it drips down slowly into the soil, and we can fill that bag quicker than we can if we were to probe the soil and provide water in a more manual way. So those Irricades, barricades that are used for irrigation, we've termed it Irricade, are sources that we supplement our water truck and trailers to increase our ability to water more trees. With the Irricades and the water bags, we've done, and our specimen and historic trees, we've done outreach to people to say, hey, you can help. You can throw a little water in this water bag and help this tree survive. We actually have a volunteer that is filling 3 of the Irricades on East Anapamu for us on a basis that we work with them on. We have signage on all of our Irricades and water bags to say, if you'd like to help, you can give us a call and we'll explain how. So, and then lastly, we went to each of the property owners adjacent to historic and specimen trees, reached out to them, said, these are important trees. We'd like to help you develop a watering schedule, or when it's a public tree, ask you to help supplement that watering when you can do that. So we've personally reached out to those individuals adjacent to all those trees. So as I mentioned, the Irricades and the Gator bags are sources for us to quickly put water at a location that can be dispersed to trees without the staff member being there the whole time the water is being dispersed. Young trees, we have a bag. The photo on the right is of one of our trees that has a Gator bag on it. Gator bag is a name of one of the types of watering bags. So our truck driver can come fill that bag up in a couple minutes' time versus watering for 10 or 15 minutes by probing. The roots of small trees haven't developed yet. So their roots that absorb water and nutrients are pretty close to the trunk. So the watering bags work really well for those. As trees mature, their roots develop farther out away from the trunk of the tree. So the watering bag's no longer useful to them. What we've done on East Anapamu is installed these Irricades. You see in the left photo there. Attached to that, that holds 125 gallons of water. We fill it up once a week. The day before, we open the valve, and it drains out through gravity through soaker hoses that are placed throughout the parkway there. They're not shown because we've covered them with mulch, but that delivers that 125 gallons or close to that, because it doesn't completely drain, but over an 8 to 10 hour period overnight, and the next morning we fill the Irricades up again. We close the valves, fill the Irricades up again, so that they're stable and don't get taken away from the location. So this is our tree watering diagram that we've worked with Water Resources to develop, and Madeline's going to go into that in more detail later. But as you can see in this diagram, on a mature tree, the tree roots grow well out beyond where the canopy reaches. The roots that absorb water at the bottom of the diagram it says feeder root area. Those area, the area shown in white there down there is the area in a normal situation where the roots develop, and it's the best place to provide water so that the tree can get the most benefit from that water. So watering the trunk of a big tree doesn't help. Watering too far out doesn't help, but this is the best bang for your buck. The other thing that I wanted to stress here is turf and ground covers, typically their root system only goes down a few inches into the soil. In fact, overhead watering, when you apply overhead water, it also goes only a few inches into the soil. Tree roots, however, develop in the top 3 feet of soil. So they could benefit from water that goes deeper. The key point that deeper watering is better for trees is for 2 reasons. We get more water into the soil if we water deeper, and the ground covers and grasses can't access that water that's down lower, so we don't have as much competition for the available water. So watering overhead provides water in the top couple inches. Yes, trees do get some of that, but they have to compete really hard with the turf grasses for that. Turf grasses metabolism, for lack of a better term, is much quicker than a large woody plant. So they're going to use more of that water than the tree can, quicker than the tree can. So our recommendation is that continue to water trees. They're a valuable resource. We want to save them, and the city's doing the best that we can to save our trees, and we encourage the public to do the same. But the way the water's delivered it should change so that the trees receive less competition for the available water and more benefit. And with that, I'll hand it off to Madeline.
Chair Kilburn, members of the Water Commission, my name is Madeline Ward. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor, and I'm pleased to report that we have been working with the Parks and Recreation Department, Forestry Division, and within Public Works Water Resources to develop some new materials related to saving water and saving trees at the same time. This is one of the more common questions and concerns that we get from our community is how to best water their trees, and as the drought continues to worsen, how they can ensure that they are able to save their trees and recognize signs of stress before it gets too far. So we are developing a comprehensive flyer with information on where to water trees, as Mr. Downey just went through, how much to water them, how often, and how to look for signs of stress. We are also going to have much more information available on a web page, including frequently asked questions and more details about specific irrigation methods, similar to what Mr. Downey was explaining. We do have an existing tree care video that's been well received by the public, but we're going to create another more in-depth video that shows different irrigation methods and how they can be applied to small trees as well as larger mature trees. And we are also developing some public workshops to not only put out all of these new materials, but also to do a good question and answer session, because many people have specific tree needs that they want some further help with. And as always, the city is here to help our community save water, whether we're in a drought or not, with a variety of our programs. Our most popular program is our free water checkup program. This is a one-on-one customer service that's really tailored to each customer's property and their concerns. As you can see, the checkups that we are conducting have more than doubled since 2013, before we had the drought declaration in 2014. Another popular program is our landscape rebate program. We've been running this program since 2009. The average water savings per customer is about 19%, so that's for single-family homes, multifamily, and commercial. And it's it's a customized rebate per property. This can include a rebate on water-wise plants, on irrigation systems, on pressure regulation, on mulch or gray water systems. And this program has also grown substantially with the number of rebates issued per month. Pre-drought declaration, we had an average of 4 per month, and right now we have about 30 per month, so we are very busy. So we're really proud of our programs. We're pleased with the customer response and the community response. And we do hear great feedback each week from customers who want to show their appreciation for our field staff and our phone staff and our great programs. In terms of public outreach support services, as our supply situation has become more challenging, staff has needed additional help with outreach support. We do have a current contract with Katz and Associates to assist with desalination outreach, and we are requesting to amend the contract to include support related to drought and water supply challenges and communicating that to the public. So the scope includes a strategic public outreach plan, educational messaging on our water supply challenges, media relations, and this would be a contract increase of $52,294, which also includes funds for extra services if needed.
So, I don't know if we briefly touched on this last time, but we now have a better feel for the revenue impacts from moving towards a turf grass ban and the 40% conservation. We do anticipate it to be about a $1.6 million revenue loss for FY17. At this time, we are recommending use of reserves to address that. We believe it's although we are currently planning to use $7 million from reserves, given the options of trying to get a drought impact fee in place, we just don't believe there's adequate time to do that, and rates, as you well know, have just gone up on people's bills at this point, and so I think it's appropriate to take a step back and look at addressing this lost revenue as part of the FY18 rates. We will be, as part of the contract for water rate development, we will be exploring the drought impact fee, so we will be bringing that back to Water Commission and Council for more discussion. Rationing. This comes up pretty regularly, discussion of rationing and the role of rationing. To clarify, we do believe it's the option of last resort. Rationing, we've been pulling together information for that, but I think for this community, it would have a significant impact on the outdoor water usage, in particular for the average user. So We believe it's not appropriate yet. However, we believe it's prudent to continue to develop this plan. It is rather comprehensive to the extent that it requires us basically to establish budgets for every single customer in the city. It's fairly time-consuming, and then there's also an appeals element to it. If people violate, there is an opportunity for them to appeal, and of course that requires staffing and resources to manage that. Based on our just preliminary look at it, if we were to go to rationing, the average user would likely end up with insufficient water to do much outdoor watering at all, just giving a glimpse into how stringent a rationing plan would need to be. We will continue to develop this, and we hope that we'll have more information for discussion in the spring of 2017. Not that we're anticipating that we would need it in the spring of 2017, but we believe, based on our current timing, that we'll have something for continued discussion on that. And that concludes our presentation, unless there's any questions.
The packet item also had a paragraph about development resources that was not addressed specifically, I don't think, in this presentation right now. And in view of this gentleman's questions, could you briefly describe?
What we went over was, development in general has an impact to the community, but as our community uses about 10,000 acre-feet a year, new development is about 27 acre-feet in general. Last year it was 6 acre-feet is what new development brought on, and so it's a very, very small component. However, it has a significant impact on many people who live and work in the community, and it has been kicked around. I think we've talked about it for the last 3 years, is what to do with development. And at this time, there wasn't an interest in stopping development. Stopping development doesn't do anything for the summer. It's literally something you would do to help save water 2 to 3 years out. Any project that has a permit there'd be many legal issues to stopping that. And so it'd be pretty much anything that has not received a permit for construction. And so given the small amount of water that's involved, it has been pushed out as an option in the future. I think if we were certainly talking about a rationing plan, that would be something to tie it to. But it really is a discussion for the commission and council to kick around. That's where it currently sits.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, these projects are very visible, as this gentleman noted. Many of the projects also are rebuilding on sites that had previous water use, so they don't represent new water use. In fact, they may represent less water use. Thanks.
My only comment was the fact that the city went through a general planning process. They looked at long-term water demand. And yes, we're in a drought, but the development which is happening is consistent with that long-term water supply. As we go forward the next 5 years, and in fact, the long-term water supply is reanalyzed, we may look at long-term development again at that particular point. But again, I'd reemphasize what you said, that we've looked at it 2 or 3 times. It's about 27 acre-feet average. Over the next couple of years, that will not make or break anything which is going on in terms of our water supply budget.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
Well, we do have 2 recommendations, A and B, which is on to council, so I'd recommend staff recommendation on A and B.
Just before I have a second on that, do we want to add letter C? I know we already took a vote on informing council.
I think it was a separate motion, which actually was
okay.
for the December 1st meeting.
Chair, I think I understand exactly what the commission is looking for, and we'll be adding that to the drought presentation. We'll actually add comments from commission onto the report.
All right, perfect. All right, I have a motion to approve A and B. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, passes. Okay, we will move on to...
Question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can you, and maybe I'm just teeing up for further staff contribution, where is staff on the next increment of desal design and construction? Can you describe, as we're talking about running out of water, running low, can you describe what that, where staff sees that going forward?
Chair, Councilmember White, yes, we are actively working on what would be involved in expansion of the desal plant. In particular, remember one of the major hurdles was conveyance. We believe we have a new option available that could expedite that conveyance project. And we are working on the details with that, and we hope to bring back something soon on that for more information. We're also part of the contract that was approved by Water Commission in July and authorized by Council in August. We are working with Corollo engineers to put together what amounts to a request for proposals from IDE for various expansion capacities. We're going to be looking at 1250, a single skid. We're looking at 2 skids. We're looking at 3 skids. As you may recall, we do have a pricing to add 3 more skids, but that pricing did expire a year ago, and so refreshing that pricing. And so we are ramping up and want to be ready should this winter not come through to at least have a discussion about what those expansion costs are and be ready to move if we need to.
Great, thank you. Okay.